First flight. Up they flew, rocketing along a single strand of light up toward a thick cluster of threads. Looking down, Rory saw the glowing track beneath them, but could not see the ground. How high are we? What happened to the earth? James sounded nervous. Remember to hold on to the stone, shouted Belecha. You'll see. The earth is where it always was. It's us that's changed. All around were billows of shimmering clouds. Occasionally they could see small points of light in the distance. Once or twice a large sphere glowed far above them as they whisked by. We're about to drop down, yelled Belecha. You'll feel a jerk, then a fast fall. Hold tight. There'll be a small bump when we get there. Rory squeezed the ring, not wanting to slip off when they jerked to a stop. He saw by the others' white knuckles that they were doing the same. Now, shouted Belecha. As warned, they yanked to a stop, plunged down, and then bumped as they hit. They were sitting as they had started, around the stone, now small again, on the sandy ground. Nearby, the end of a wooden ladder poked up through a rough dome, rising only about 3 feet above the ground. A few cottonwood trees to the west showed where a river was winding through the desert landscape. This doesn't look much different than home, said James, with some relief. Rory spoke up. But it's day. When we left, it was night, and the moon was up. Gold star, Tekta. I figured you'd rather be able to look around, so I aimed for early morning. Didn't want it to be too late in the day. It might be too hot for you pale faces. James looked at him. Who you calling pale? Tima, as always, focused on the important points. She turned to Belecha. I'll agree that was some ride. Now, why don't you tell us where we are and why? Belecha looked down at her. You have always focused on the issue at hand, Heliotome. What do you mean? I've never met you before. You know that. Let's handle your first question. That's the easiest. He glanced at Billy, who was looking around suspiciously. Tinglin, you aren't as stupid as you look. Where are we? Billy glared at him. I'll give you a hint. You were here just this afternoon. Try pretending that there are no roads or buildings. James, ever the logical one, said, There are no roads or buildings. Or anything else except that dome. Is it covering a hole? Belecha nodded. It's a Kiva. Bigger than yours, and it has the covering in place. Kivas are best with a top, for a lot of reasons. I don't mean imagine here with no roads. Imagine the places you were used to without the stuff folks have built in the last 100 years or so. Billy squinted his eyes, looked around, and then it hit him. This is where Rattlesnake Ranch is. You mean the place where the guy wants to build the mini-mart? Asked Rory. Billy nodded. Yep, I was here this afternoon. James was confused and looking a bit panicked. How did you make everything disappear? I've been here hundreds of times since I was a kid. The road runs right in front. Where is it? Our house is just a half-mile that way. He pointed toward the river. I should see it from here. Why don't I see it? Tima was fascinated. Where are the power lines? And listen. No sound of the freeway. You can always hear it in the distance. They turned to Belecha. He grinned. You're right. That's the answer to where you are. But you should have asked when you are. It's before your calendar was invented, but we're about 5,000 years in your past. Rory was too stunned to speak, but Tima was not thrown. She looked around, nodded as if this made perfect sense, then turned back to Belecha. The question still remains, why? To show you, we have to go into the Kiva. You have your show hidden in there? Asked Billy. Belecha looked at him and smiled. Not to pull a trick like you think, but yeah, we need to be in the Kiva for you to see this. How come? Asked Billy. Focus, answered Belecha. A Kiva focuses energy. You said my hole was the reason I could see you last night, said Rory. Belecha nodded. That's right. What you call a hole is actually a Kiva, or the beginning of one. Think of it like a lens. If you grind a piece of glass right, it can focus rays of light. If you hold it near something small, that small thing will look big, like a magnifying glass. If you aim it toward something far away, that thing can look close, like a telescope. You with me so far? They all nodded. Well, a Kiva focuses energy, not images. It allows you to see things you couldn't see without it. You can tune your Kiva just like you grind a lens. How? Asked Rory. If you use it right, it keeps getting better. James appreciated quality tools. Are you saying this is a good Kiva? Belecha nodded. The difference between this and the hole you kids dug is the difference between a science kit telescope and something at an observatory. It's the same basic thing, but this one works better. That makes sense, said Billy. Okay, how do we get in? Just a minute, Hotshot. You're about to step into my parlor. Not many people have ever been invited in, so a few rules. First, I know it's a challenge, but you need to put a cork in your pie hole. All of you. If you have to ask a question or make a comment, think about it. Every single thing you say in the place affects it. Billy looked thoughtful and then nodded. You got it. I'll wait till we're out to tell you what I think. As if I cared, Tinglin. Tima poked Billy in the side. We'll keep quiet. Good. The other thing is, try not to understand or make sense of what you see. When you try to analyze something, you're putting a space between you and the experience. Look, feel, pay attention. There'll be time for questions afterwards. Agreed? They looked at each other and nodded. Finally, before we go in, take a few breaths and try and focus. You need to be in the proper frame of mind. Rory closed his eyes and tried to set aside his concerns. After a couple of minutes, he opened his eyes and looked at the others, then at Belecha. Belecha looked closely at them and nodded. Good. Your brains are clearer. I'll go down first and light the fire. Belecha led them to the ladder, climbed down, and soon they saw flames flickering. He called up, one at a time, don't hurry. You're doing more than just climbing into a hole, so pay attention. They hesitated, not sure who should go first. Finally, Billy stepped forward and started down. Before his head disappeared, he grinned and saluted. Then he was gone. Tima went next. She didn't look at the others, choosing to look up at the sky as she climbed down. James hung back, but Rory pushed him toward the ladder. He didn't want James to have second thoughts up here alone. James grimaced and went down. Finally, Rory started down. As he stepped onto the ladder, Rory felt a vibration coming through the wood. The ladder was an old-fashioned thing, with rough branches lashed between two thicker poles. The uprights had been worn smooth. In spite of the fire below, it was dark, and Rory had to feel his way, reaching down with a foot to find the next rung. The vibration made it feel like he was climbing down into an enormous, throbbing engine. From below, he heard Belecha chanting and beating a small drum. It seemed like Belecha was introducing him to the place. The drumming and chanting buzzed in his ears, mixing with the vibration of the ladder as he reached down with one foot, then the other, again and again. His reaching foot finally felt sand, and he stepped off the ladder and faced the others, the flickering light dancing across their faces. The Kiva was dark and cool, a single round open space about 21 feet across, with a few cubbyholes dug into the walls. The walls were smooth, as if they had been plastered, and in the dim light Rory could see several large glyphs, including the 4 from their stone, painted on the walls. The domed roof was about 15 feet high in the center, coming down to about 12 feet along the walls. Belecha sat on a large, flat stone rock that rose several inches higher than the ground, beating a slow rhythm. A decorated rattle lay beside him. The fire was not in the center, but near the opening, so that the smoke rose from it out to the sky. A low wall behind the ladder had several pots and baskets carefully stacked behind it. Belecha stopped drumming, pointed at a place on the wall in front of him. They walked to where he indicated. Sit, he ordered. They sat on the sand floor facing Belecha, and behind him the fire. Rory looked at Belecha. Gone was the wisecracking trickster. This was the old grandfather who held the knowledge of the ages. You are more than the skin and bones you see in the mirror. You have each decided to come to this world at this time because at this moment a very old mistake can be set right. To understand what I am saying, you must see the energy world that supports the world you know. Don't try to make sense. Seeing will be enough for now. Belecha pulled out a small pouch. From it he poured a handful of powder that he threw into the fire. A small glowing ball of smoke formed and slowly rose. Instead of moving up and out the opening, the ball moved to the center of the roof, directly above Belecha. Rory snuck a glance at the others. Tima was looking at the smoke, her eyes shining and a calm smile on her face. James was looking around the Kiva. Rory guessed he was trying to find the source of the smoke's glow. Billy was staring at Belecha, watching for any tricks. Rory looked at Belecha, who nodded at him and gestured with his chin to the smoke. The story is up there. Tinglin will be along soon. He grinned at Billy. He would never believe it if he didn't watch me until everyone else sees. So we'll open it up and wait for him.